Practical exercise is to create Java web application using Spring Boot Java web application framework. And as usual, we need to do some preparations. And we need to make this library executable. What this library does, I will show you later. When we created this project, we extracted it from zip archive. And in zip archive, it is made by design for security purposes. Execution bit is removed from applications. So if you extract something from archive, you have to do manual operations to make something executable by yourself. And that is security feature, because if you know how to make it executable, probably you know what you are doing. And here are actually two libraries, one for Firefox web browser, another for Chromium as open source web browser, or Google Chrome as a closed source browser on top of Chromium. And we can make both of them executable. So I will not go in details about this meaning, but they are made executable now. And of course, if you do it through web, through the graphical interface, and you go to the properties, permissions, you see, execute, now it's anyone. Before that it was nobody. And then we have to investigate package GTM activity 15, and we have to make class Jetty application like an entry point for web applications. There are two ways how you run Java web applications. One way for simple small applications is you start with public static void main method, and if you start in such way, then usually you also rely on Jetty library, or how to say, okay, jar file. Somewhere in dependencies it said that you will start running Jetty web application server, and then you will deploy dynamically your class inside this web application server for it to run. Another thing is you deploy it as a web archive or WAR file. Then you have either Jetty or Tomcat or whatever, and they have somewhere public static void main method. But what you do here is you put this WAR file in their internal container. Usually it's called web apps folder of this application server, and then it is compiled, classes are loaded and executed depending on what kind of URLs or web requests you make to that web application server. So this is usually for small applications, first variant, and second variant is for large applications, for enterprise solutions. And if you will search for some examples, always also you need to check, is it the self-contained application which starts with a main method, or does it have only like servlets these Java classes inside it without actual entry point for execution. And in this case we have this simple approach. We say that we rely on Spring Boot application, and not only Spring Boot but Spring application, and for Spring application we can use start it with main method, and if we run it following, it is just a Java application which doesn't do anything. But if we say, and here these annotations are actually because we have a little bit of non-standard configuration. I think only annotation which is usually needed is enable auto configuration, but we need some more things here to set it up properly, because we will rely on some other classes in other packages in this project. So we add needed annotations, and of course here what is already done for you is in pom.xml file we have added this dependency on org Spring Framework boot application. So otherwise, of course, we would not be able to import these classes because these are not part of Java standard. And then inside this main method we create another thread for the Spring Boot application. So if by the compiler still works, something has happened with the compiler, it doesn't work anymore. What did I change in Eclipse? No idea. Oh, this is the compiler. I should use like GD core by default. And what else? How we changed it? So the compiler is set, and then I don't remember. I have some optional part for the compiler was in previous exercise. GDC. Something is misconfigured for me. Ah, not here. Here. So what do we see? So it runs another Java thread, similarly to this multi-threaded exercise we did, and then it passes reference to your class here as an argument to it, and in general it means please run in separate thread this Jetty application class, and it also gives here arguments from main method to here. And with these annotations and this particular execution of Spring application run method, we can create absolutely simple and stupid Java web application which runs but does nothing. But when we will run it, something more complicated will happen. So we should see here that Spring Boot framework has started, and then somewhere at the end we should see here that the root web application context was created, following filters to read for URLs were created, and some URL mapping was also created, and this application listens on port 8801. And if we open it into browser, so how does it work? This was only entry point for our Java application, but to make our life easier, one particular simple controller is already implemented as a template for us. So this is this controlling part. You annotate it with controller annotation, and then of course you can name it whatever you like. And here you say that request mapping will be following, that if value is slash, this means root folder, then this particular controller will be executed, or called, loaded and executed. And then inside this controller we have more precise mappings for get requests. And if get mapping is empty string here, this means if we open root folder, nothing after that for get requests, we will get following response body. So this method returns string and takes following parameters. If you don't need to care about anything, you can create method which doesn't take any parameters and just returns something. And this returned string will be used as a content for generated HTML, and in this case it generates following HTML code. And for example, if we want to implement handler for different URL, like insert teacher, here we have error because for such URL it is not implemented. We can do something like here we add these two annotations. That request mapping is insert teacher. And now we have just empty page. But if we would return something like, I think it's not recompiled automatically. Yeah. So this return string is just sent back to the browser, and as you can see here, it's not anything formatted, but it is wrapped in HTML automatically by this web framework. What we need to implement actually here, we need to webalize our backend class here, which is management for teacher objects. For example, when this insert teacher page is opened, we actually see following form with following source, where we can put names for this teacher, and when we submit it, actually teacher manager insert teacher method is called, and it is inserted into teacher table in this backend. So what we in general are doing here, we are adding web interface for this teacher manager class, which is something like backend implementation. So first thing is following. If this page is opened, we shouldn't return it works, we should return following HTML. And it is quite bad to do string concatenation. Therefore we will use string builder object for that to do it more properly. And we return. So we actually need to start by showing something like this. And we see simple unformatted web form where we pass some values and press insert button, which does submit to this. And of course nothing works here yet. So what we need to do first, we need to create teacher manager, but because each of these particular methods may be invoked in any particular order, I will use lazy initialization, and I will do something like this. Here, this reference to teacher manager object is already given for us, and it is null. And now when my decompiling works, my code auto-completion doesn't work. So that is Eclipse, like Lego constructor, always a little bit broken. So I fixed my file associations, but my content assistant doesn't work well. There is editor or advanced, general. Java. Maybe this decompiler tries to search too many of classes. And then I will call this method, so I don't need to call it here, but I need to call it here, and eventually I will need to call it here and here as well. So when this teacher manager object will be created, each particular session of this web application is controlled by separated Java thread. We are not creating these threads, we are just using them. And for each of these separate sessions, separate instance of Jetty controller will be created, and for each of them we will have our own teacher manager created, and until this session will be alive, so web browser will not disconnect from the server, we will not recreate teacher manager from new. Until this session is live, we will still use this already set up manager reference to this teacher manager object. And then here I showed you that any method which returns string and are mapped like get mapping and response body can produce some HTML body for particular URL. But of course, in this case, this method should be parameterizable. So we need to send some parameters for it. And then we need to overload this method. So any method which is attached to this particular URL request can work. But if we need to send some information to it, of course we need to add some parameters here. And in this particular case we need to handle name set to this particular teacher. That will be one request parameter, and another request parameter will be surname. As far as I can tell, and something is not right with my brackets. Request parameter. Something is right with commas. Let's be more careful here. So we need another request parameter. Value surname and also surname as a name. That's what's wrong. And here we may or may not have references to request and response data structures. So everything I send here as a request parameters This is response. Why it doesn't show these parameters? So request parameters are these which you can read and see here if these are get requests here in URL. If these are post requests, these are not visible. You need to debug it and see this send text. Probably that's why, because if it's shown in URL, it's not shown here. And these are these response objects. And from this request object we can get additional information if we need to customize something. And for this response object we can also customize something. Default response of course is created for us. If we need to modify it a little bit, then we modify before we are returning response to the browser through this framework. And what we need to do here, we actually need to handle two different situations. If no parameters are passed, we show this content I'm already giving, and this means we do something like this if, and brackets are here, if name is null. I do not know exactly about ands and ors, no parameter. Then we create following response. I will do optimization later, else valid parameters are passed. We need to insert teacher. And I do not know about empty values here. It's bad request. So else. Okay, I will do optimization later. If name so if it is empty name and surname, we need to return following thing. And we need to say it is bad request. Here we need this reference to response value. And we can do following. Here we see example. We can just either write its numeric value, like 400, or we can say HTTP serve response baud request, which is also this 400. See here. Else we inside this teacher, and I think we report it somehow. Is following output. And here, of course, I'm using primitive string builder concatenation. Of course, in more serious cases, we would use some template using HTML template. And let's test it out. So what is null value and not what is empty value? If you open this page, let's print it out. As we opened. And of course it should be somewhere here. So let's visualize these things. So if we open this page, and we have not mentioned these parameters at all for get request inside URL, for post request as additional textual data sent together with request headers, then these values are null. If we say, for example, we mention them and we say something like insert teacher yeah. In following way, then these become empty strings, so no parameter mentioned at all. It has no value if it's mentioned, but it's set to nothing, then it's empty string. And it should work only in this case if we have non-empty strings passed. And let's check how it works. And as you can see, it actually inserts these values inside the database. So that about C operation for CRUD operations. Similarly, we need to implement find teacher method which takes two strings as parameters, so that means business logic is pretty similar. So what do you think about early returns? Do we return it only once and we have these else conditions? Or, okay, we will do optimization later if we will have time. So find teacher from a handling perspective is very similar. We need to pass two parameters as string, URL to which we map this particular method to be called is find teacher. It takes the same parameters. Actually, we don't need HTTP servlet request reference to this because we do not do much of request here, but we will leave it to be future proof. And we similarly create a teacher manager, and actually we can do some code duplication here because all the details are different. Instead of insert teacher, we need to call find teacher. And instead of this, I think it is absolutely the same. But here our handling is more complicated because we actually get a collection of teachers back if something was found. So we need some list of teacher objects. So this part will be quite different. And here we have some code duplication. I see it already, but we will optimize it later. And here we need to convert collection of teachers into nicely formatted table on server side, in this particular case of course. So here we have to do for teachers. We need to append table row, and here we need to say something like this. It is not tested, maybe bugs, and I see code duplication between this part and that part. But as usual, we will do optimization later if it will work and if we will have time to do optimization. I need to delete that part which was used. What's that? This definitely is not needed here. And this is not needed here. So now we can try to search. Why insert? There are differences between these forms. So and instead of insert, probably our button should be called a little bit differently. It should be called find. And what else? This seems quite logical for searching, because if I do not pass any searching criteria here, I think everything should be returned. That's how it should work. So, and I think that's what it told here. So if it's null, so I think this would be something like this. So if it's empty, show this form. If it's not empty, search for it. Allow to search again. And do this. And that means I will start doing some optimization here. So that means if it's now, okay, let's first test it out how it works. So if no parameters are passed, I still have this code somewhere here. Don't need that one. If I find everything is returned, and I can go back. I think something like this should be okay. And now about delete teacher. As far as I can tell, there is no requirement for us to implement update teacher. So U part is not allowed through the web interface, but of course it's similar. But we are allowed to handle delete part from CRUD operations. So for delete teacher again, we can remove that to do, We need to annotate this method properly, and URL is, I think, something like delete teacher. Then we can use that as a template for passed arguments, but instead of this we probably need just ID parameter to be handled. ID, and name is ID for it. No second parameter. And again, I do not know, but I assume that maybe copying and pasting this as a template will make me more productive. It is just an assumption, of course. If ID is not passed, we need to show following form. When we delete, we get status like true and false, I think, yeah. So not find teacher, but delete teacher. And then, depending on status, what do we do? If it's okay, we return following. Another problem here is that everything, similarly to arguments passed to main method from command line, everything passed as an argument through the web, of course, is converted into string. And therefore we need to convert this string into normal integer. So, and I use integer parseInt for that. And something I think is missing. So here we can also return bad request if it's failure. Then there was like here, so response is okay by default, but if it is bad request, then we do something like this. So delete teacher. Probably this is not what we expected. But if we write an existent code here, so I think, so here we first need to do, if it's null, not empty string. What are requirements, how exactly it should work for empty strings? Not documented exactly. Let's say something. So I will first do like this. It looks quite ugly, but probably it will not throw unexpected exceptions. And then if it will work as we like and as JUnit tests like it to work, then we will try to make it less ugly. Still got this. Why? Something is wrong with my logic. So this is null, not null. Oh, if it equals, if it is empty, not equals. So we cannot delete these, because if we try to delete them, I will show you here in database, because of referential integrity, some of these teachers are used, their primary key is used as a foreign key for in this table. So these teachers 1, 2, 3 cannot be deleted. If I try to delete them, no idea why it's so slow. We can check how our server behaves. So as you see here, I am creating new teacher manager object, but I'm never disconnecting from the database. And here I'm again creating denial of service attack on my server, because if I just, when this particular thread for this particular controller is finished, of course all these data structures are dismantled by garbage collector. But when these are dismantled by garbage collector, what is not so good here is that I am not closing this connection explicitly. That means every time I create new session to this application, I create new connection to MySQL server, but I do not close it. And that means until these parallel connections are closed due to timeout, I create more and more concurrent connections to the server. And that's not good. Of course it will work if you will close connections infrequently, and most of them will be closed during timeout from the server side here. But if we will do it in some large production, then that may be a serious problem. And so I showed you here, and now when I wanted to delete something here, I also have enabled extended log for this server. That's not the error I expected here. Prepare, execute. I can't say that this server is particularly busy, because if we look here on administration page, nothing very bad is happening here. But what I wanted to see is that this particular record shouldn't be deleted, not because of some timeout or whatever, but because of referential integrity rules. Like, I think we are printing it out here in console. If I do it here through the web interface, I say delete first teacher, and I see it here. SQL integrity constraint violation exception cannot delete or update parent row, blah blah blah, for eigen key constraint fails. That's what I wanted to see also through this MySQL workbench. And as far as I can tell from manual test, in general, all these things are implemented. And when it looks like this, we can also start thinking about automated tests. There are two sets of tests. System level test, which is developed as a Selenium WebDriver test. And here we need to say which particular browser we will be using. Let's say Firefox browser here. and then run it. And here it emulates user activities. If for some reason you want to use Chromium, I do not recommend to use Google Chrome because Google Chrome is closed source browser. But if you use Chromium, then you can use it as well. What was happening here? I think I closed it accidentally. Your computer do not have Chromium installed by default, I think. And if you will search for it, you will see that this Chromium package is only provided by Canonical as a Snap application. And I don't like Snap because I think if you are not very excited about containers and using containers even for user applications, it is wrong format to use. And if you want to use for some reason, and so you need to add another repository entry where Chromium is available as a apt package or Debian package using Debian standard. I have done this on my physical computer, I forget about this. So if I will not found it, something like this. That would be proper. Do not follow what Canonical provides to you because they create solutions like for IBM and large enterprises. If you are not IBM, then probably this solution is not for you. It may be a solution for Accenture, because Accenture is also in similar size to IBM. we can say that we will use it as a and that probably is it uses sudo, so we can run it as normal user. And then update. And I need only that part. I'm not completely sure that on my physical computer I have used this package, and of course every time you just add some entry to some random repository somewhere on internet, you may install some malware as well. And while we are waiting for this, we can also, here in this activities, there are two levels of tests. System level, I showed you already how this test emulates user activities, which has its benefits and its drawbacks. Benefit is that you can actually check how exactly it looks like and feels like and works like for a real user. Drawback is that in general it checks only general parts of generated HTML and request responses, and therefore here is a system level, unit level test, which tests this web application using web API. So instead of using either Firefox or Chromium as a browser to it, it invokes these methods of API directly, and this works faster and it works more precisely. And if you try to run it, I will not be surprised that something will be wrong, because not everything can be checked through this system level test. And we see something like this, compression failure. We don't see it through the web browser, but what this dumb test requires is that we have nice line breaks at the end of these strings. So when we interpret these breaks to render HTML, it is nice. But when we check actual values, it is different. So that means everywhere here, when we have I don't know about this part. Do we need line break after for action? Not non-line break, but not visible break, but still line break. So that means we can do something like this. Hopefully one line break at the end. And I will be optimist, I will replace all. Let's review, line break, line break, line break. Maybe it's okay. Oh, and that was only a problem. I'm gladly surprised. So now we have also Chromium browser installed as a Debian package, not as a snap package. So we can try this Selenium WebDriver using Chromium browser or Google Chrome if you consider it as an option as well. As far as I can tell, something didn't work well. So, Chrome driver. Past as a driver execute must be said by I have done this. I also need to uncomment this part. And now it also works with Chromium browser as well. Then, before we think about optimization, how can you create such system level tests? Of course, if you know this API well, for example, what you can do with this driver object, find element, do this, do that, you can write this as any Java code, but usually you do not have enough knowledge, but you can generate code for it using additional tools. And I do not know about Chromium or Google Chrome, but particularly for Firefox, there are at least 2 different plugins which you can use as a code generator to record and create these system level tests. One is Selenium IDE and another is Catalan Recorder. When I worked professionally as a tester, I used Selenium IDE. When I started working as a freelancer and teacher, then Firefox changed its API very fundamentally, then this Selenium IDE plugin became quite broken. And then I searched for alternatives and I find out that there's another plugin called Catalan, and then I started using this, but I think that now again maybe you can install it again here just by searching So I see both of them. They are similar, details are different. Let's try this first one, which I used regularly some time ago. I will allow to run it also in private windows. And then how does it work? These two plugins, both either Selenium IDE or Catalan Recorder, works as a simple recorders and players. You can record some activities and you can replay them. Let's record some new project. Let's say base URL is, I do not know. And this base URL is used to distinguish from which place you need to start recording these activities, because nowadays, of course, you usually have more than one single tab opened into the browser. So maybe not here. Training materials. Java Bootcamp. Web application. And those proof of concepts, that will be okay. Then you can, for example, here I had some false start. I can clean it a little bit up. Like, we can leave that, but we can delete that one. And we can replay it. And you can use this. When I worked as a professional tester, I used this plugin a lot, because every time you find some bug, you have to create some conditions how this bug actually happens. And then when it is fixed, you need to test it again. And I almost always recorded all my activities in this Selenium IDE, saved them with some naming convention, and if I needed to do them and something actually didn't work, I didn't care. I just used it as my productivity multiplier to do some of these manual labor tasks faster. But for serious automation, and that I would call like mechanization, I still need to dig this hole myself, but with help of such recorded scripts I could do some of these things a little bit faster, and if they failed I did something manually myself. But at least, for example, when I need to do some kind of standard navigation to somewhere, etc., I just executed some of these scripts. But what is also important here is that you can export it into Java code. For example, you choose Java JUnit, what you know how to use. And I think that's it. Let's put it somewhere here. And here is generated code for that. We can put it somewhere in our project. Let's put it here. And of course not everything will work, because first we need to say that now it's in different package. And then not everything here, at least last time I checked, was prepared correctly to set up this Firefox driver. For example, when we try to run it, and it still fails. So this code generator is not great. It is great to generate this particular code when you do different kind of activities. But if you know how to make it working, you know that you should set following things before that. Like actually we will copy everything from setup from here to here. What is missing? Base URL is missing. And okay, we will not use neither sleep nor logger. And then this, now with this added header to set it up, maybe it will even work. It does something immediate here. I think we are also running Jetty application mine. Not needed here. Not URL here. So everything here is actually garbage. We don't need that. If we want to use Firefox, we use that and that. So if you know how to set it up to make Zen, you can use either, and you can also check how well this Catalan recorder works. Maybe it generates better code particularly for setting it up. So how I did this when I worked professionally as a tester, as I told you, I recorded almost everything using these browser plugins, and when I needed to redo it just only once after developers claimed that this bug is fixed, I just replayed this particular recorded script, and you can edit it like a XML and JavaScript file if you like. And how exactly I say that I'm recording it here. Click, click, click. But I want to do something like this as well. Okay, something happened here. We can replay it. Clicks, 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 and open this page here. And then we can export it again. to the Java WebDriver and JUnit. And it adds some more settings here, but this code still will not compile, not run, because we need to be more specific where this particular driver library is located, etc. So, and then when I needed to do something like to test for regressions, and I generated initial source code from these saved scripts, and then I made them as a more formal, more robust executable tests for regression testing to check that application always works. So that's also about these things. And yeah, finally, if we want to do so now when it works, let's do following: save it. And then we can do some optimizations. One of things we can do is to make code shorter, and then of course we can try to make it faster, but we will not try. So that looks okay. This particular part, true, false, back. So we can put this part outside these two ifs, because it is common part, something like here. And actually we see it's common something like here. So actually this part could be everywhere, because for any response we need to add back. And for any of such modifications we can run JUnit test, checks that it still works after our improvements, and if it doesn't work, then these are not improvements, these are just changes. So here I don't like these too much, but because I do not have good ideas how to make it shorter, I will leave it there. Similarly here, I think this part and that part is the same, and I need to add back everywhere. So I can do this here. Still should work. And I have to add this actually in any case. So that means I can put this in any case, and I don't need to check for now. No, this is wrong. Something is missing. So we can put it without any checks, But for else, we have to say if name is not null and surname is not null, then we have to do what was else here. Something like this. And here, this part is very ugly. So back, we can add unconditionally. So this can be at the end only once. Here. If it's no. Okay, I will leave it here. So now at least I do not have duplicated code for string builder appends. But if you will think about it carefully, you still may remove some of unneeded code. So here my feeling is it can be improved. But because we need to reserve time for something else as well, so I will leave it here. So as usual, do you have any quick questions or comments about this?